Korean people turned out in large numbers on Wednesday to exercise their democratic right to vote, and the majority of them chose Park Geun-hye to be the next president of South Korea. Joining us to help us break down the results of Election Day and to look forward to a Park presidency is Professor Se-ryeon of Kyung University. Thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
Let's start with Election Day and the high voter turnout, which turned out just under 76%. Conventional wisdom leading up to the race had it that Moon Jae-in would best benefit from voter turnout being over 70%. It didn't play out that way. What is your sense of what happened?
I think the large turnout, I think it has to do with, first of all, it was a big drama. And these two storied candidates going at it each other, representing a big progressive and also conservative factions. And also we had a lot of interesting characters coming in and out, An Chol-soo being a very huge factor, and also Lee Jung-hee providing a lot of antics that kind of played the role. I mean, you can arguably say whether she was just an interesting character or she single-handedly united the whole conservative party.
Or distraction, right?
Right. So all those things contributed to the drama factor of it. But other than that, the large turnout has to do with, I think, Park Geun-hye having already a solid, big block of those people, especially older generation, those aged 50 and up, which constitutes about 40% solid block. You saw that the people in the 50s turned out 90%,
right.
Close to 90%. That's just about everybody. So the level of interest was just huge. I think it has to do with kind of ideological divide that it represents, and the regional divide that it represents, and generational divide that it represents. It's just all the ingredients for the good match was there.
And that's something that was discounted. I think people thought that voter turnout, if it's high, means that the younger people turned out to the polls in great numbers, and many of them did, but it sort of played out to where the older people turned out as well. The voter turnout there was high as well. Tell us a little bit about the shift, though, in the total number of eligible voters. Those in their 20s and 30s has actually gone down over the past 10 or so years.
Right.
And those who are older has actually gone up by 10%. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. It's a testament that Korea is becoming an Asian society. Right. We have more older people, and we have a very dismal record in terms of a birth rate. We don't even reach the replacement rate of 2.1 children in a household. So it's a predictable thing. It was been kind of predicted that we'll have that kind of shift. But we didn't really respect that the older generation will unite to this extent. And in this election, they're going back to what you're saying about the Moon Jae-in having an advantage if there's a higher voter turnout. It didn't quite turn out that way. I think DUP really had a chance of doing it if they had An Chol-soo firmly in their side. But failing that, I think there are a lot of disentrenchment and also disappointment among the young voters. If you look at the voting rate for 20s and 30s, almost one-third, solidly one-third, went to Park's camp, which was a little bit higher than anybody had expected.
Well, I mean, what could An Chol-soo have done, or what should he have done if he, I guess, truly threw his full support behind Moon Jae-in? What would he have done?
I don't know if there's anything that could have been done other than An Chol-soo being the candidate himself. Short of that, I think there has to be always kind of factor that those centrist voters in the An's camp will either have to decide whether to join the An or Moon or Park's camp. And in this case, because An kind of dropped out with a certain level of frustration, I think a lot of people kind of shifted to Park camp.
Right. I mean, aside from all the analysis, I think one of the takeaways from this election was the voter turnout and the state of democracy here in Korea. 76% turnout, something the Korean people should be very proud of. Now, you pointed out Wednesday night on Arirang News that Park was the first modern-day president with over 50% voter support. That's something she can hang her hat on. But of course, over 48% of the voters did not choose her in the ballot, on the ballot there. What is she going to have to do to reach out to that 48% of the population?
I think that 48% of the population can look at it can be looked at in different ways. It's a generational, it's ideological, and also regional. I think she has to kind of overcome this kind of dissension and also kind of disharmony in Korea. That has surfaced to be one of the most important factors. I think what An represented, and very positively, is the fact that he went out and talked to people. And of course, he mainly talked to young people, but I think that mode of kind of listening to people, what they want, what kind of dissatisfaction, and what kind of misunderstandings they have with each other, I think that can be addressed if at the top, Park Geun-hye kind of has the policies and getting people in from different sides and form a kind of harmonious leadership group to begin with. I think that would be a start. And it can go to many different levels and many different programs, but if she focuses on, for example, mid to small size businesses rather than big businesses, which has been the case, I think that'll affect to the harmony aspect of it. And also, I think she should just talk to people more frequently and often.
Okay. I mean, regional divisions, generational divisions, President-elect Park has talked a lot during her campaign about bringing people together. She spoke about that during her victory speech yesterday. One of the things being talked about her possibly doing is extending an olive branch when she forms her transition team, maybe choosing a liberal to head that team. What are you hearing about that? Are you hearing anything on that front?
Well, I think she's going to bring in a lot of people who's already kind of in her larger camp. The rhetoric about harmony and getting people together, every politician say that. But I think that her actions in the first 100 days or first part of her administration will attest to whether she's really serious about that. I think the big challenge is that because this disharmony or the contention between the two camps were so great, that even if she brings in people, it doesn't guarantee that people will just work together right away in harmonious way. So she has to focus on the effectiveness of that team also. So it's going to be a tall order. But I think she should try and give a big experiment of having those people from different spectrum of ideology who there are several people who are already in her camp anyways. So take advantage of that situation.
I mean, we've heard a lot about this, about her being a uniter and being someone that brings the people together. Is that, you talked about the first 100 days as well, is that something that you realistically think that she is going to be able to achieve at the beginning of her presidency, bringing those people in? Is that something she will do?
I truly think that she will at least give it a serious try. She has been kind of branding herself to be a keeper of promise. And she recognized that the healing aspect of this dissension is going to be kind of defining factor and defining characteristic of her administration going forward. So I think she'll give a very big effort. But one worry is that she has shown to be not very flexible in many ways. Stubbornness has been kind of criticism levied on her. So how flexible she deals with the varying situations and those criticisms that will inevitably come from those in the opposition, we'll have to see how amenable she is in that regard.
Sure. Now, I noticed you didn't bring your crystal ball with you here today, but I'm going to ask you some crystal ball questions. Looking ahead to February 24th, her inauguration, and beyond to her 5 years in power here, President-elect Park said in one of her first two debates that the problem with presidents of the past is that they made promises, they made pledges, but they didn't keep them. Park, of course, being a candidate, has made a lot of promises, a lot of pledges. Which ones do you think she is most likely to keep during her 5 years in power?
I think she'll try to, she'll try to keep her promise in job creation field and also helping out the household debts and real estate matters. I think those are things that people feel the most, And because she can quickly gain confidence and trust from people strategically, that's logically the first thing she should attempt.
That's her top priority.
That's her top priority. She right out said that I'm going to be a president that takes care of people's lives.
So day one, she's going to walk in and she's going to start that process in motion?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And if she doesn't, shame on her. She should. Because the people's expectation at this point is also in large part economic. A lot of social arguments and social kind of contentions couched in the economic terms. If they have jobs, if they have a comfortable living, probably their voice is not going to be as harsh as it is today. So I think she recognized that aspect.
And presidents typically enter office with a grace period. People tend to be a bit patient, understanding that this isn't an easy job, of course, being president. How patient are the Korean people going to be with a President Park as far as these changes go? How much grace of a grace period do you think she'll have?
Not very long, I don't think, because Korean people generally don't give a very long honeymoon period.
Sure.
She'll come in, symbolic, a female president. I think there will be a lot of celebrations. But next day, when people go to work or not go to work, more importantly, they'll start to feel that, well, this president should deliver what she says before, right now and right away. So that voices will be heard almost immediately. But how large or how loud does it get? I wouldn't even give half a year. I think it's going to be 6 months.
All right, so she's got her work cut out for her for sure. Definitely has her work cut out for her with regard to economic democratization. You mentioned some of the things that she has promised to do. Which of these pledges, including the ones that you mentioned, are actually achievable, and what sort of difference do you feel personally they are going to make in the first 6 months or first year of her time in power?
Well, the economic democratization, despite the fact that it has been talked about almost constantly, is not well defined at this point. DUP has chosen to kind of target the chaebol or the big conglomerates to be kind of demons or to be the core problem, but I think the common wisdom shows that it's not the whole story. I think she has to kind of look at and also carefully investigate what kind of core problems that Korean economic structure has. I mean, it has been a kind of big conglomerate dependent economic structure, and everybody kind of criticized the previous governments that they kind of lost the timing to fix those so that the small to mid-sized companies can grow together. Whether she could do it now in this time of global recession is a big challenge, because if she had some leeways and have some fiscal flexibilities, probably she could do something. But at this point, she cannot, and she said she would not raise taxes, and her fiscal flexibility is limited. And also, it takes a long time to grow things like German-style Mittelstand, or what France is attempting to grow the sizable mid-sized companies. So it's going to take some time. So I think that in order to keep people's expectation at bay, I think she has to start with some several projects that can show some immediate results, like the household debts or the real estate matters, that people can feel that things are changing. That'll hold over to a point to where really fundamental changes start to kick in.
So get those sort of smaller things out of the way, and then work her way up to the bigger tasks of succeeding where past presidents, as you said, have not.
Right.
Let's speak about the current president, actually, President Lee Myung-bak and Park Geun-hye, both conservatives, both, of course, from the Se-ryeon party. Mm-hmm. What sort of tone or what sort of difference in tone do you expect Park Geun-hye to take from the one that President Lee has taken?
President Lee, coming from entrepreneurial or the corporate background, is very level-headed, sensible in a market-oriented terms. I mean, I don't think he was a dictator, as people kind of branded, but he was very keen on having a cold hard reality of market competition. And I think he had this, successes in that regard in the economic terms. But he was outright terrible at communicating with people, managing expectations, giving them kind of semblance that this democracy is kind of progressing, especially in the media sector. So I think that Park strongly feel that those are the aspects that she has to address. I think it's not just Ahn Cheol-soo who came along and said we have to communicate, but that kind of dissension has been kind of criticized such a long time that Park, even if she comes from same conservative background, will see that Korean people will not stand still if they don't see that kind of, inclusive and harmonious actions coming from up top.
So she's got to take a different tone from the previous administration.
Very different tone, but a very natural tone of kind of a consolatory, almost female kind of caring tone.
And we'll certainly talk about the female aspect here in just a moment, but we would be remiss if we didn't talk about North Korea. The KCNA denounced the Se-ryeon party on election day as the rather confrontation maniacs, their words. They didn't mention President-elect Park by name when reporting on the election results. North Korea, of course, has a history of testing administrations right before they come into power or right as they come into power. How do you expect North Korea to test President Park in the early days of her administration?
One good thing about dealing with Park such a long time is that we kind of expected what they're going to do. And as you said, they're going to try to test Park. But Park has been around for such a long time, even before Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il, and she was there when Kim Il-sung was still alive. So she's not a newcomer. And she probably will do the same thing as she does in the domestic matters. She's not going to be kind of agitated too easily, but she will try to do what she said she would do, which is to kind of keep a principled approach, but open approach to the North Korea. And she said she will meet with the top, Kim Jong-un, top guy. And I think she is serious about that. I think if she's not, and she should be, because the break in communication has been such a long time that if we prolong that period, probably we will lose a kind of a contact point where to begin. And we have a lot of agreements before in place so that we can kind of pick up from where we left off.
Let's start with the Park Geun-hye issue here. Is this something, now that she has won, now that the campaign is over, is this something that can finally be put aside, finally be put to rest, or is the Park Geun-hye issue going to be raised time and time again here over the next 5 years? What's your take?
My take is that that issue is going to be there throughout her life. I mean, not just during the presidency, because that's such an easy target. I mean, he was a dictator. If you just focus on the dictatorship, what kind of oppressive policies he has, and disregard the economic successes he has accomplished. I mean, people will see that we have this vivid image of people demonstrating, dying during our democratic struggles. So it's such an easy target to lob any kind of weapon at.
Sure.
But I think the sensible thing that people realize is that those days are over, and long over, actually. And no matter how much you try to brand her as a dictator's daughter, that period was when she was in early 20s. And this is 21st century, and that was when Korea was in developing, an early developing country, but now Korea is in leadership position. Even if she wants to try any kind of dictatorial tactics, probably people would not let her. Right. So that simple realization, if it has not sank in, I think as she goes along, I think that would be kind of a given fact.
My sense is, too, is that if the opposition doesn't get their way in one way or another, they may pull out that Park Geun-hye card. So I think you're probably right. I think we'll hear more about this in the years to come. Now, the first female president angle, President-elect Park and her supporters have been somewhat vague on what they're going to do to improve gender equality here in Korea. Her track record not exactly shining either in terms of gender equality issues. Can we expect President Park to champion any causes for gender equality during her time in office, and if so, what might they be?
My guess is that she's not a kind of a feminist activism-oriented president. But say what you will about her gender, she's a female, she's a woman, and symbolically it's really big. And the very fact that Korea has a female president, that fact alone will kind of permeate. People realize that there's not such a big wall, and even if we're a Confucianist society for such a long time, that is either starting to break down or it has already broken down. I mean, Park is not the only female who has made it to the top. I know for a fact that my students, over the years, I see the difference that the female students have excelled far more than the male students. Shame on male students, but that movement, or not even a movement, that phenomenon has been there already in place. Maybe Park has quickened the pace a little bit, but not that much.
Well, my concern, though, is that there will be a segment of the population who will say, look, we have a female president now. We've made a great stride forward, and we're there. We've already fixed these problems because we've got a female as the leader of our country. Obviously, it's going to take more than that to address many of these concerns that are out there, though.
Sure. If we ask the Americans, now that you have a black president, is racial tensions over? Right. Probably a lot of still saying, oh, hell no.
Absolutely, absolutely not, exactly. We're running a bit short on time now, but I do want to ask you one last question here. Let's say you're advising President-elect Park Geun-hye. What piece of advice would you give her today on how best to move forward?
I think she has a big mandate. Now that she has more than 50%, she has a big mandate to move Korea to a direction that she envisions. And one thing that we kind of regret is that despite the campaign period and all kinds of debates, we don't know where Korea is headed. We've gone out of the developing country stage a long time ago, but at this point, do we kind of move towards a Northern European kind of welfare state, or do we stay a very competitive society like the United States and other models? Those debates and those arguments has not been fully exhausted during our campaigns, and I think it's her role to envision and share with us what kind of society she envisions it to be, and let us have the say that whether we like it or not. And that requires a lot of communication, that requires a lot of programs to share with people. And that kind of openness, that kind of dialogue, that would be the first thing that we'll ask. And I think that would be a foundation to define what her 5 years presidency would be.
Professor Song, we thank you very much for making time to speak with us today.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for this week. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week after 10.